Hi, I'm Holly Sizemore, and this is Rose, my co-host, and Lucy, my senior cat who just had to get some airtime this week. Welcome to Saving America's Pets, where today we're going to explore more about why the summer months are some of the most difficult times for shelters. The summer months are always the most difficult time for shelters as intake rises during kitten and puppy season. This June's anticipated summer spike was exacerbated by the trend so many sectors are facing right now, that of staffing shortages. Critical members of a shelter's team are animal care workers and veterinary staff. In what appears to be an unprecedented shortage of such team members all across the country, pets' lives are at risk, and so is the mental health of our shelter workers who are traumatized when they aren't able to save all the savable pets entering their doors. Because animal shelters may find themselves at times with too many pets and not enough kennel space or resources to care for them, it's paramount to have an at-capacity action plan. We know the summer spike will eventually recede, but what can we all do right now to help our shelters avoid the tragedy of having to euthanize pets for lack of capacity or the resources to care for them? Today, my special guests are Kristen Hassen, the Maddie's Director of American Pets Alive, overseeing the Human Animal Support Services Project, the Maddie's Learning Academy, and AMPA's Life-Saving Initiatives. Previously, she served as the Director of Pima Animal Care Center, the Open Admission Animal Services Department in Tucson, Arizona. Also joining us today is Luis Quintanilla, the Executive Director for the Humane Society of Harlingen, located in the Rio Grande Valley in deep South Texas. Luis joined HSH after most recently being the Director of Operations for Palm Valley Animal Society. Luis's team, despite the summer challenges, has been able to maintain Harlingen's no-kill benchmark so far, and Kristen recently put out a great resource that we'll be sure to link to in the description on how to prevent euthanasia for space and keep the community engaged in that effort. Hey, you guys, thanks so much for being here.
So glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Kristen, let's start with you. You interact with a lot of shelters across the country in your role. What are you hearing about shelters being at or even over capacity, and why do you think this is creating such hardship right now?
Yeah, so I think there's three factors we have to consider when it comes to the current state of shelters. Shelters are crowded. They're experiencing the usual seasonal intake, but they're not to the extent that they've seen in previous years. So in earlier years, we've seen even higher intake in most shelters, but that doesn't really matter right now because some things have happened since COVID. Number one, we had a lot of staff turnover, including a lot of new staff starting who has never worked in these conditions and have no idea how to operate in a packed shelter. And so there's a lot higher anxiety among shelter workers right now because this feels like unfamiliar territory. Number two, we are also seeing overall stress of the pandemic. People are just generally struggling right now, and that means that stuff in shelters feels even worse. And third, I think there's a real anxiety about what's coming. And having run government shelters for 10 years, things almost always even out. And so we've all kind of been wondering, where are the animals? And I think there's a real worry that we could be beginning to see the return of all those pets that didn't enter care. And so I think there's a number of factors. In reality, the situation this year is actually much better than in previous years, meaning 2019 and earlier. But it feels like we aren't standing on firm ground and we're not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, Luis, so you run a shelter in an area that has seen a lot of life-saving progress, and you also have a lot of challenges, resource challenges in that area. Are you experiencing some of what Kristen describes, and how is it affecting your staff?
Definitely experiencing that high intake. It's been hitting us pretty hard for the last couple of months. I think we're chronically full. I don't think we've been, able to have any empty kennels within the last couple of weeks for very long. If we manage to empty them out every day through adoption or foster or rescue transfers, by the end of the hour, it's going to be filled again. So it's just that constant sense of urgency that's been keeping us going. But on that note, it has taken a toll on staff. And a lot of our staff, I've been there since the old days when it was much more difficult and there was euthanasia for space, which is fortunately not a reality that we've had to confront again, because we've been really proactive and our community's been really responsive when it comes to stepping up as fosters or just with our intake diversion. But nonetheless, it still does take a toll, and it can be tiring for our staff. And one of the major things obviously is kittens, and at a certain point there's only so much you can do for those situations, right? And it's hard for us to keep that positivity in mind, knowing that, hey, look, this is how it is for right now, but it doesn't mean that it's not going to get better, and these are the steps we're going to take to make it better. And trying to offer services to our community, spay, neuter, things like that. So it's definitely been a trying time, but it's not something that we didn't anticipate. And that was sort of my work over the last year or so, is being that person that, hey, look, we have empty kennels right now, but this is a once in a lifetime thing. Empty kennels are not a reality that we can take for granted. So we can never just, throw our feet on our desk. We have to get ready. And we did that through diversion and foster and, all the above.
Yeah. So Kristen, you also, I saw on Facebook recently, had some great pragmatic tips as well on how to keep animals from coming into the shelter in the first place. What are some of those tips?
So the real challenge is that there's too many animals some places and there are not really enough other places. This time of year, you're probably hearing everyone say we're full. But what that means looks very different depending on where you are. And so before we get to sort of what shelters on a case-by-case basis can do, what we're really calling for, working with all of our partners in the Human Animal Support Services Project, is like looking together at the whole problem and how we solve the big picture. Because if we do all work together and unite, we can do the impossible and make this not a forever problem. But most immediately, if shelters are facing capacity issues, number one, they need to be fully transparent with their communities and tell them the situation. We have been trained, and Holly, you and I have been doing this long enough to know we were trained to really suffer in silence. Like, we were taught, take the animals in, deal with it, do what you have to do. And that was the wrong way to go about it, because the public really didn't know. So number one is like, tell the public everything you can, tell them the capacity you're facing. And I'll give two more right now that are really important. Number two, ask people to hold lost pets for 48 hours. Mike Wheeler in Cabot, Arkansas is leading the way on this, and amazing things are happening. They're getting about 80% of lost animals home without them coming to the shelter. And all they're doing is asking people to hold those dogs for 48 hours. So that is a tip anyone can do right now. And finally, the last thing is, even if you have no resources, no money for new programs, utilize the technology that's out there. Supported self-rehoming is taking off all over the place. If people need to surrender their pets, ask them to help rehome their own pets through home to home or rehome or any of the other available technologies we have.
Luis, you guys are known for having a really great relationship in terms of being able to be very communicative with your community. What are a few things that you did direct to the community, and how did you use media and social media to help your efforts?
Sure. Well, like Kristen touched upon, it's all about transparency. How can people help if they don't know that we need it? And how can we expect that, when we don't have our doors open? So, we started out with a pet pantry, started out as something pretty minor, right? And then it's grown into something that we literally give out hundreds of pounds of food every single week. It's awesome. It's been able to help people through really difficult times. And it's been able to, improve our space situation, which is not something we ever thought would be possible from something as simple as a pet food pantry. And that was just the beginning. We grew our foster program from maybe 10 foster families about a year ago to almost 100 foster families in 48 hours. It happened so quickly, and we've been able to handle that load ever since, and we've been increasing it. Before we ever did any of that, we started managed intake. It was intake by appointment. Before that, it was the same old model, right? Night drop-off kennels, just 24/7, bringing animals, no questions asked, without gathering information about what people and what challenges they were facing with keeping these pets that they found or can no longer keep. And that was just the beginning. And, all of us are a little bit nervous about just implementing that, especially during a pandemic, but it turned out to be the best time ever, because, it showed that no matter what people are going through, it seems like they want to step up and do the right thing for these animals. It's a pretty uniting.
I think our shelters and the public got a little bit used to the idea that, hey, it's all good. And now that you have really full cages, Louise, what are you guys doing to get animals out really quickly?
Definitely a diversion. We haven't stopped that at all. We keep animals out of the shelter every single day by offering people resources, whether it's social media pages that, or groups that rehome animals, and there are a bunch of rescue groups together. We do transports, obviously. We do, our foster program is huge, but it's mostly just our social media presence. None of this would be possible without our presence in the community and the fact that we're really recognizable. So even like little things that don't seem like they matter, that annoy me, at least in the beginning, before I could see all its work, all its, all the fruits of that labor. We're like, watermarking with a consistent branding, watermarking with a consistent like font and a color. It's nice. It's just like any other thing, right? People recognize, oh, that's Harlingen. That's what they need. I like that place. I like what they do. How can I help? And it's just that brand recognition. And we're out there all the time. We have events lined up, for the next months, like the next 5 or 6 months. We have events lined up at every single possible place in our community, from dentist's office to parks to ribbon cuttings. Like we will, wherever we can shove some animals in front of people's faces for them to fall in love with, we'll do it.
Kristen and you both mentioned staffing shortages. How do you make those events happen when you're so short on staff?
We only have 9 staff, including myself, and we have an intake of over 5,000 animals a year. So it's definitely volunteer heavy. We have interns. It's really exciting. We started that last year. We work with the local universities and we work with local high schools and vet students, things like that. And it's awesome. They come and help out with our vaccination clinics and with our spay neuter marathons that we do with organizations like Animal Balance and things like that. So it's great. It gets the community involved. It's getting the next generation involved, literally grants us the help we need while saving those precious resources for those animals who really need that extra critical care.
Kristen, what are some other tips that you're seeing, some things that other shelters are doing across the country to move animals out?
If you're wondering why I'm sitting out here with the mosquitoes, it's because my foster puppy is in the house wreaking havoc right now. So I think that we can start with ourselves and what can we do to make a difference, and making it easy for staff, volunteers, and the public to foster. People should be able to sign up to foster and come in the same day to get an animal. And that's kind of an unfamiliar concept to lots of folks who think we need to go through trainings and all kinds of protocols and signups to foster. We're telling people, get the pets out and then do the training on the back end. You can require that training within 3 months, but don't make it a barrier to placement. Number 2, so many organizations have barriers. Even our highest intake shelters in Texas, in California, they will require licensing for a pet to be reclaimed, and they'll say that on their website. They will require a fee that is unaffordable by most people, and it'll say that on the website. They will require adopters to do a home check or bring all family members. All of these barriers slow animals from leaving. The name of the game is speed, and so we have to get animals out the day they can leave, not let them sit in the system. One of the problems we have in sheltering is shelters that aren't under as much pressure let animals sit in the back of the shelter for far too long, sometimes weeks or months. And that takes up valuable kennel space that can be used by other animals. So we're saying get them in, get them out as quickly as you can, and then you avoid those bottlenecks, because the bottlenecks are what actually lead to euthanasia for space. It's not typically just simply too many animals.
I've heard from a number of shelters that they worry if they communicate broadly and widely about how full they are and that they need help, their reputation might be damaged. What would your advice be to shelters who are worried about that?
We have found 100% of the time the public appreciates transparency, but you can communicate things in ways that aren't blaming, aren't throwing people under the bus, aren't blaming the community for the problem, but just simply asking for help. What the public wants is they want to be asked for help, and then they want you to make it really easy for them to help. So if you're constantly telling them how full you are, but you're closed 3 days a week and it's hard to adopt a pet, that will create resentment. So you have to kind of start with yourself as the organization, do the work on your end to make sure that people can help when they want to. And then after that, it's no holds bars. Tell the public what you're facing, and even better yet, take them in the back of the shelter, do a live video, show them what your clinic looks like. That's how you gain the widespread support of the community. So when you ask for help, they are there to answer the call.
Having a healthy workplace culture is at the center of all of this. So if your staff is bought in, they understand the mission and they can speak it and breathe it and live it, they're going to be able to communicate that really effectively. And, regardless of how, what scale you're operating at or what staffing levels you're at, I think it's always going to be a positive story, even if it is a really serious story at the time. It's all about tone. It's all about messaging. And yeah, people are going to get tired of like the same sad, awful, depressing story all the time. They're going to wonder where there is the return on their investment. I volunteered 20 hours there last week. I gave my new washer and dryer. What am I going to do? I've adopted 3 dogs already. Like, you want to show people the return on their investment, and the same thing that brings us back to the shelter every single day. You want to impart that to the public. Like, why do we do this? Because it's incredibly rewarding, and we can't really convey that completely, just how rewarding it is. So we got to try our best in bringing the community in and showing them, hey, look, this is why we do it. It's a beautiful thing, and you can be a part of it, even when it's hard.
Can I add one? I just want to add one anecdote, which is Detroit Animal Care and Control, which is one of the toughest shelters in the country. They just started doing adoptions in 2018. They had never even done adoptions. And they began doing foster, and they asked the public to come foster, and they did a big event. And the first time they did this, they had a line of people wrapped entirely around the building waiting. They ran out of dogs. And what was significant about that, it's exactly what Luis said. They didn't just ask. When people responded, they showed the videos of the people picking up the fosters. They showed the pictures of the animals leaving. They showed the line. And that part is critical, showing the successes, showing the community what can happen when you all work together. That is a key piece of the equation.
I love that, combining that transparency and not being afraid to ask for help with the celebration and the communication of success. That's powerful. How are you handling, Luis, fosters who want to foster, but they need a break, or they can only do it for a couple of weeks?
We say, great, if you can do it for a couple of hours, that's going to really help us and that animal. And that's how we talked about when we first switched over to much more open adoption, program than we had before, right? We said, well, the concern was, well, you're going to have a lot of return adoptions because these people aren't committed, right? Because we're basing all of this on the way we always have done things. And so what's the worst case scenario for that animal? It goes for a couple of days, it doesn't work out, but they got a field trip out of it. What does it matter? That's all it means. So awesome, he went to the beach, or they got a pup cup, or they just were on a couch instead of on a grand bed in the shelter overnight, but with no family. I think that's what we need. We need it, even if it's for just an afternoon.
We know it's kitten season right now. How do we help people get excited about fostering kittens? Because kittens are so much fun. They're so cute.
Well, I think that kittens, much like puppies and moms, are a relatively short-term commitment with a huge return on investment. I think there's ways to incentivize the fosters by letting them help be part of the adoption process, letting them help select the adopters, being communicative with them when they have emergency needs. That's the biggest issue we run into with orphaned and neonatal fosters. But generally, people want to help. And so we lose big opportunities when people are coming into the shelter and bringing us a litter of kittens. We should be asking those people to foster them because they cared enough to bring them into the organization in the first place. So every opportunity we get, we should be asking, and then we need to highlight the work of the fosters. I think the animal welfare movement's done far too little of this thus far. Every shelter should be highlighting the work of fosters and volunteers every single day, because it is through them that we are successful. And I want to add one more pitch for foster, which is safety net fostering is the future. Owned pet fostering is going to be a critical piece of the equation of the future. So when people do face crises, when they are going away for whatever reason, when they need a temporary place for their pet, the communities all over are stepping up, and KC Pet Project's a great example of this, stepping up to do owned pet foster. So somebody that does have a real crisis can have someone care for their animals versus surrendering them to the shelter, which is what has historically happened. And the situations in the first 6 months, this program really emerged out of COVID. And when you hear the stories, it's just person after person who wouldn't have gone to the hospital if they couldn't have found a foster. They would have literally died if they couldn't have a foster because they loved their animal so much they weren't going to surrender them. So that's another program right now we can be doing where people who own pets actually are their fosters, or actually can find foster for them in the community, so they don't have to bring them to the shelter.
Luis, what are some of the fun ways that you guys are really getting the kitten message out?
So it began maybe a couple of months ago. We had a kitten shower, and that was how we, I mean, it was a cute thing. We had balloons, we had like all this, fanfare about these people dropping off formula and bottles and all this other stuff. And we made it a fun thing. And, when it comes down to it, it's not, it doesn't seem like fun, right? We're preparing for this tidal wave of kittens that are going to overwhelm us, right? But we said, well, instead of just accepting that, let's just hit it head on. And instead of asking for people, to come and foster, but we don't have anything for them, let's be prepared with that. So we had shelves of KMR, we had shelves of, bottles and everything else, right? Heating blankets and everything like that. And that's the way we sort of spun it. And it was like, hey, look, this is a really big issue that we face every single year. And, this is how you can get involved. And here are the resources to do it. So basically it's all just on that person now. And like, hey, look, we try to do everything we possibly can to make no barriers exist any longer. And that's how we're sort of marketing it. And we do share that all the time. We have Facebook groups that are dedicated for our fosters. They can post progress reports every single day. And it's really great. They all get involved. They're giving each other tips, and it doesn't even involve staff anymore. Like, what do you do when this kitten, his eye is a little bit gunky or whatever? Like, there's other fosters stepping in to answer those questions that they have already asked before in seasons prior. So it's awesome. Like, it's just getting exponentially easier to handle that when you have your community on your side.
What is the one most important thing you would like the public to know right now about what our shelter workers are going through?
I was on a Zoom call on about 3 days ago with the director of a high intake shelter in Texas. And she was like, her face and her hands crying because her staff had to make their first euthanasia first base list in several years. And I think that I want to kind of go back to this idea that we all have to solve the problem together. Like, I am so amazed about that we're actually going to get to no kill 2025, and I believe we are. And if we're going to sustain that, we cannot do it alone. Like, we can't do this without everyone who can help, every animal lover in our community stepping up and being part of the solution. And so what I really want the public to know, and every shelter who isn't dealing with this kind of space crisis, is that we can solve it, but we're going to have to do it together. And so everything we do moving forward should be with that spirit in mind, of how can we all come together to solve these problems, and to make sure that every California, Texas, Florida animal has a safe place to go, and that we're all part. And those are just 3 high intake states, but that we can all be part of making sure every animal is safe.
I think Kristen said it best. I mean, we can't do it alone. And every time I try to think of a way of getting people to rally around our cause, or the best thing to do is just to invite them in and tell that story. That's the most important thing, because it's, even right now, our save rate for the year in Harlingen so far as of yesterday is like 94%. We're very happy. We're very excited. Not a single animal has been euthanized for space in more than a year and a half, at least. But still, that toll is heavy. That weight is heavy for that staff, because it doesn't stop. And so I encourage everybody out there who isn't a part of a shelter in any way, whether they're volunteer, foster, adopter, if you're not already a part of that shelter world, just step inside for a little bit and get to know the people who work there and volunteer there. And I think you're going to probably want to do something about it. So just get to know us.
Louise, how can small rescue groups and foster-based organizations help during this time?
So they can help in such massive ways. They have abilities that we don't many times, whether it's getting that individualized care to those really critical animals. And, they're pivotal. Their role is pivotal just as much as any adopter or volunteer. We need rescue groups. And, I encourage all rescue groups out there to really reach out to anybody and, try to find ways around maybe barriers that are there that possibly in place, use, the imagination coupled with the shelter staff's imagination to try to get these animals out, because we need you. We need rescue groups.
Louise, Kristen, thank you both for being here, and thank you for everything you're doing to help both save the lives of pets and help our shelter workers fight the good fight and really stop and celebrate all of the successes that they work so hard for every day.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
So the big takeaway here is that there's no better time to save a life than right now during the summer crunch time for our shelters. And if you agree, please hit like and subscribe. Because right now you're not only saving the pet, you're also helping to preserve the well-being of our hard-working shelter workers. Because together we can save them all.